When you hear the word homeschooled, what comes to mind? Maybe you picture a kid sitting alone at a kitchen table, buried in textbooks. Or kids that don't get much social interaction. Or maybe just something weird. You're not alone. A lot of people assume homeschooling is worlds apart from public school. But what does it actually look like? Here in Nova Scotia, for the 2024-2025 school year, 1,860 students are registered as homeschoolers. That's less than 2% of all primary and secondary students in the province, but the numbers have been steadily growing over the past 15 years. And here's the thing, no two homeschooling experiences are the same. Some families follow a structured curriculum, others take a more hands-on, learning through life approach. I'm stepping inside the world of homeschooling to hear about the challenges, the freedoms, and the moments that don't fit into these stereotypes. This is At Home.
Sadly, all the dogs will come.
I went down near Annapolis Royal to meet Lindsay Corkett and her cousin Jan Dunk, who are in their first year of homeschooling Lindsay's 12-year-old daughter, Melody.
If you want to open the door right
Melody is autistic and has attention deficit disorder as well as dyslexia. If Melody had stayed in the public school system in Ontario, she was going to be moved to a high school to start grade 7, and Lindsay felt like that was going to be too much after Melody had already struggled.
Even though she was supposed to be going into grade 7, she only had like a grade 2 education. So in Ontario, they just pass on the kids. Like you're graded, but you're not expected to pass anymore until grade 9. And then in grade 9, they just fail you continually until you age out of school, which is horrible. And she's incredibly, incredibly smart, but she just doesn't learn the way public school teaches. And she was sort of just being ignored.
Policy about whether a student passes or fails, also known as retention, is at the discretion of the school boards in Ontario. The two school boards that Melody was enrolled with both don't have explicit policies on when a student should be held back. But the Toronto School Board, which is the largest in the province, states in its policy that a student should be held back only after all alternatives are exhausted and only in exceptional circumstances. Lindsay knew something needed to change and decided after working closer with Melody on school over the COVID-19 shutdowns that homeschooling was the best option. But Lindsay knew that she couldn't do it on her own.
If I stayed in Ontario, homeschooling wouldn't have been an option. I wouldn't have had anyone to help me with that.
No. So Lindsay and Melody packed up and moved to Nova Scotia, where Jan and her husband Craig live, so that Jan could help with homeschooling Melody. This was the perfect fit because Jan has a background in education as a Montessori teacher, as well as running alternative schools in Ontario. Jan operates as Melody's teacher for homeschooling. She walked me through what a day of being homeschooled looks like for Melody.
What we're working on now with Melody is looking after herself. She's 12 going on 13. So that's listening to her alarm, getting up, getting ready, and doing things like getting herself breakfast, getting dressed, having a shower if she didn't have one the night before, and doing what we call community responsibilities. So they're not chores in the sense of chores sounds like it's a bad job, but it's a community in the sense of our household is a community and we all participate in that. Then from 1 until between 3 and 4, we stop. We go into the classroom and we do reading, writing, speech therapy stuff. We do fine motor work. We do a bunch of all that kind of stuff that's in a planned, I put stuff on the board, she goes through it and erases it. And I sit with her during that time. That first bit, we're working on us not being there. We're there to kind of keep her moving, but the idea is eventually we won't even need to be there to keep her moving. And then in the afternoon, we want her to go outside and spend some time outside. And then at 5 o'clock, schooling sort of shuts down in all senses, in the sense of she has computer time, she can do what she wants.
Even though this might not seem as rigorous as a typical day at public school, both Jan and Lindsay say Melody has come a long way in the last few months.
The gains she's made from September until now are more than she's made in the last 3 years.
Yeah.
Homeschooling lets Jan and Lindsay focus entirely on Melody and tailor her education, something the public system can't offer. Many kids like Melody have an IEP, an individual education plan, that provides supports like extra test time or curriculum adjustments to fit their needs. The Canadian Federation of Teachers say 77% of teachers report students' needs have become far more complex in the last 5 years, contributing to what they call an educational crisis, with special needs students often being left behind.
Like there's 30 kids in a classroom, you just can't spend that amount of time. Like it's just not possible. And that's sort of where the school system is at. Like it's not focused on individual needs. It's not, because it can't be. Like you either have to learn a certain way or you don't learn.
They don't fault teachers or support workers like special education resource teachers or CERTs for kids like Melody not getting the attention they need, but say that the system isn't set up for everyone.
Melly the other day says to me, "How far behind am I?" I said, "You're not behind Melody. You're doing great for Melody." I said, "Are you better today than you were yesterday? Did you learn something today to make you grow from a person from yesterday?" But the school system basically just says to them, "You're behind, you're behind, you're behind, go, go, go," but doesn't really give them the support that they need to do that. And I understand that teacher has 30 kids in that room, and that CERT has 4 or 5 kids in every classroom. They can't do some of that stuff, and I get it. However, what are we going to do with those kids? We're just going to say they're throwaways? We're not going to educate those children? And I have had number of kids at the school that I started in Toronto was basically public school kids. They were not, it was an independent school and people had to pay to go there, but those were not your fancy wear a uniform, I want a really good name school for my kid. They were, I was going to take my kid to public school and it's not working. My kid isn't progressing. My kid's getting into trouble because they start to act out. They start to have behaviors. And the problem is that then they're labeled a bad kid. But really, if we think about it, behaviors are just a way of a child saying something's not working.
When I was younger, there was, I think, more of an emphasis on play. We did a lot of crafts and storytelling.
That's Emma Martell. We met at the Halifax Central Library to talk about her experience growing up as a homeschooled kid in the city.
Storytelling was a big one. And then as we got older, it shifted to, we bought a lot of different curriculums. There was one that we did at one point, which was entirely focused on the Chronicles of Narnia. So you read the Chronicles of Narnia, and then if there was something that came up about like the context and the history of when the books were written, you would learn about that. And then there would also be independent math programs that we would buy and do as well, because it's hard to, I think, pull math out of Narnia.
But as Emma got older, she started to think about going to public school.
I started volunteering at the public library when I was 12. I met a lot of kids who were in high school and were doing service hours for specifically the International Baccalaureate program. And I got really interested in that.
The International Baccalaureate program offers students a different style of learning focused on more individualized education. It all did work out for Emma in public school, but she did notice some differences between her and her classmates.
I think one of the biggest differences I noticed is that a lot of these kids had been in school already for 9 years and were very disheartened by like chaos and concerns with like discipline that come up in the classroom and can be quite exhausting, I think. And I was coming in very fresh-faced and very optimistic. There were a number of times I can recall seeing something happen that didn't sit right with me. Maybe it was bullying, and I was coming from this place of like, well, I've never seen this before because it's just me and my siblings. And so I would tell on people or be very outraged. And I remember my friends getting quite frustrated almost with me because I felt like, no, it's just, it happens. This is just normal. This is kind of the reality of this setting.
Emma continued with public school until she graduated and thinks it had some positive effects in her life.
My mother did an amazing job, but being around your parent every day, all day for years, you start to kind of clash with each other. And so I think my relationship with my mom really improved actually once I started public school because we were able to kind of take more space.
She says she might use her education to become a teacher herself, but she's not sure she would homeschool her own children if she ever has them.
I think I would like to, in the sense that I do love the idea of being able to share my interests and passions with my kids. But it is this huge sacrifice as well on the part of the parent. My mom devoted so much time and energy to planning our lessons and to carrying them out with us. And I think she's very happy with that decision. But she had career plans and aspirations prior to deciding that was what she wanted to do with her life. And I think that would be kind of the stumbling block for me, is that I have all of these ideas of what I want to do. And I am really interested in teaching, but I'm picturing myself in actually a classroom in a school. And that's something that you have to sacrifice, is kind of your own ambitions if you're going to be diving headfirst into intensively homeschooling your kids.
In Nova Scotia, homeschooling rules are pretty straightforward. You need to notify the Department of Education each year, report on your child's progress based on the Nova Scotia curriculum, and ensure they're getting a proper education. If not, the province can step in and enroll them in public school. But overall, the regulations aren't overly strict.
I would usually start my day off by going up to the barn and doing the farm chores. And then if I had English that day, I would bring my book up and read with my goats.
This might be more of what you were thinking with homeschooling. Mairead McInnes and her family moved to Clarence when she was 8. She and one of her older brothers were homeschooled on their family's farm. As much as Mairead did school at her family's dining table and around the yard, being in a rural part of the province didn't mean she was isolated or alone. Her mother organized what's called a homeschool co-op, which often looks like homeschool families getting together to do lessons together and socialize.
So my mom actually used to arrange for homeschool co-ops once a month, where all the homeschool kids and parents who were in the communities around where my mom based it out of would sign up and come, and then select few parents each month would teach a subject to an age group. They got to pick the subject, they got to pick the age group. So my mom organized that once a month, and then also every Friday from when I was 8 to, I want to say 16, she organized a homeschool field trip every single week for anyone who wanted to come, and we would go somewhere and do something and learn something.
If someone is only homeschooled in Nova Scotia, they do not receive a diploma and may need to get their general education diploma or their GED later in life. But Mairead made the choice that instead of going to the local public school, she would go to an alternative school, the Lawrencetown Education Centre, or LEC for short.
There was no other reason for me going back other than just the high school diploma. LEC was very much like homeschooling, just without my mom being my teacher, which was awesome. So I loved it. It was a great experience. The teachers there were all awesome, and the kids were too. That's a really bad name for being the school where all the bad kids go, but I feel like I can say that is not the fact at all. It's an alternative learning style. So we did much more hands-on things, and we went on camping trips.
So, do homeschoolers really struggle with social skills? Turns out, not really. Studies show that homeschooled and public schooled kids report similar social abilities, whether it's self-reported or backed by more extensive research.
I've always had friends. I have a really close-knit group that I've been friends with since I was 8. But we all still absolutely love each other, and we all hang out, and it's amazing. And my mom did an amazing job at I went to so many different extracurricular activities, and she made me do things that were out of my comfort zone. At the time I hated it, but now I can talk to people, I can make eye contact, I can do presentations, I can talk in front of people. I've met just as many public school kids that can't do any of those things that I have with homeschool kids.
When I asked Lindsay how she feels about the risk of Melody missing out on the socialization that public school offers, she said it wasn't on her mind right now.
She's not a social kid. She isn't. I think she will eventually, we'll have a bunch of homeschool kids that she can socialize with and sort of find her friend group in that, because I do think that's important. But she isn't lacking that right now because she didn't have any friends at school. She didn't fit.
Nova Scotia requires all homeschooling families to report to the Department of Education and Early Childhood Development every June with a report of how their children are doing and where they are compared to the province's curriculum. This will be the first time that Jan and Lindsay file a report on Melody's progress. They have the Nova Scotia Department of Education's curriculum as a guideline, but have needed to adapt it based on what she was doing in Ontario.
So I think because she was on such a modified program before, and because we are doing a lot of like speech therapy, we've now got an OT involved, a bunch of that stuff, we're calling that school as well. I think they're going to understand. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like, we're not following the grade 7 curriculum because
She wasn't on it.
Homeschooling isn't just one thing. It looks different from household to household. It might not be for everyone, but homeschooling seems to be working for Melody, better than public school. She's less anxious. She's moving at a pace she can manage. She's getting the attention she needs. And what's most important to Lindsay is she's a happy kid who has a support system that believes in her.